On a foggy morning in Fredericton, New Brunswick on October 10, 2024, Fatima El-Masri arranged books on a cart in the quiet stacks of the Fredericton Public Library, the scent of old paper mixing with her mint tea. At 40, Fatima, a Moroccan-Canadian, was a slender woman with a neatly pinned hijab and a warm smile that hid the strain of her daily grind. Fredericton, a city of 60,000 along the St. John River, was a charming blend of historic red brick buildings, leafy parks, and university bustle. Fatima had moved here 6 years ago with her husband Khalid, a small business accountant, and their son Sammy, 12, seeking a peaceful life after Montreal's pace. But peace came with a shadow, one Fatima felt as a Muslim woman of color in a mostly white town. Fatima's job as a library assistant was steady, shelving books, helping patrons, running children's programs, but prejudice crept in like damp through the walls. Patrons like Margaret Ellis, a white retiree, often asked, "Do you understand English?" despite Fatima's fluent maritime accent. Her supervisor, Carol Bennett, a white woman in her 50s, nitpicked her work, questioning her cataloging with a sharp, "Are you sure that's correct?" Last week, a patron, a white man in his 40s, had bypassed Fatima to ask a white colleague for help, muttering, "I want someone who knows the system." Fatima smiled through it, needing the job, but each slight was a pebble in her pocket piling up. Today, as Fatima sorted returns, Carol approached, her clipboard in hand. "Fatima, you misfiled 3 books yesterday," she said, loud enough for a nearby patron to glance over. "We need precision here." Fatima's jaw tightened. She double-checked her work, the error Carol's from a rush shift. "I'll review them," Fatima said, her voice calm, but her hand shook as she adjusted a book. Carol's smile was thin. "Good. Standards matter." The word standards was a jab, and Fatima knew the subtext. Muslim, Moroccan, not one of us. Last month, Carol had passed her over for a senior assistant role, giving it to Emily, a white 25-year-old with less experience. "Emily's a better fit," Carol had said, eyes averted. At lunch, Fatima ate her couscous alone in the break room, her friend Aisha, a black Canadian librarian from the university, texting, "Carol on your case again?" Fatima replied, "Always." "You?" Aisha's response was grim. "Patron asked if I'm qualified to recommend books. Smiled it off." Fatima sighed, their shared burden heavy. Marla faced it too. Clients at her accounting firm questioning her foreign name, some switching to white accountants. Sammy at school had mentioned a classmate, Liam, calling him Sand Kid during gym. Fatima taught him resilience, but the pebbles were spreading. That afternoon, Fatima found a note slipped into her work bag. "Go back to Morocco." The words, typed in black ink, struck like a slap. She froze, her breath catching, and hid it in her purse before Kiana arrived to help with story time. Khalid, picking up Sammy, saw her tension. "Fatima? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low. She showed him the note, her voice trembling. "It's not the first." Last week, her desk had been scrawled with Haji, the word faint but cruel. She'd reported it to Carol, who called it a prank, and did nothing. Khalid's eyes darkened. "We can't let this slide. We deal with it quietly." Fatima nodded, her chest tight. "No police, they won't help." At home, a cozy house on George Street, Fatima cooked tagine while Sammy played video games. Marla, braiding Kiana's hair, spoke softly. "We need cameras, Des, like Aisha's library." Desmond agreed, but dread crept in. Cameras cost money and the garage's profits were thin, stretched by rent, Kiana's school fees, Marla's salon supplies. Their neighbor, Mrs. Linda Harper, a white widow, had already complained about their spicy cooking, suggesting they tone it down for the street. Desmond ignored it, but Linda's friendly chats with Ron, seen at the corner store, raised his guard. On November 4th, the harassment deepened. Desmond arrived at the garage to find a tire slashed on his work van, black trash scratched into the hood. He photographed it, his heart racing, but didn't call Walsh. Trust in the police was gone. Kiana, helping after school, saw the damage and gasped, "Dad, who did this?" Desmond's voice was calm for her. "Vandals, Kiana, we'll fix it." But his hands shook as he patched the tire, costing $150. At school, Kiana admitted Ethan had shoved her bag, muttering, "Island girl." Marla, home late, found a new note under their doormat. "You don't belong." "Des, this is a pattern," she said, her voice breaking. "Ron, Linda, Ethan's dad, they're connected." That night, Desmond and Marla sat in their kitchen, the notes and photos on the table. "It's not just kids," Desmond said, his voice low. "Gary's in it, maybe Ron's buddies." Marla's eyes hardened. We get cameras tomorrow. We catch them. We act. Quietly. Desmond nodded, his resolve firm but fear lingering. They were Jamaican Canadians, their roots deep, but Sault Ste. Marie's thorns were sharper, and their fight was just beginning. On October 12, 2024, Fatima El Masri stood in the staff room of the Fredericton Public Library, adjusting a small security camera tucked behind a bookshelf. The device, a $250 strain on their family budget, blinked its red light, a silent sentinel against the racism seeping into her life. At 40, Fatima, a Moroccan Canadian, felt the weight of the past week. A note in her work bag demanding go back to Morocco, her desk scrawled with Haji, and her supervisor, Carol Bennett, nitpicking her cataloging with veiled jabs about standards. Fredericton's foggy streets hid a venom that threatened her library job, her family, and their place in the city of 60,000. Fatima's husband Khalid had installed the camera that morning, his accountant's hand steady despite the worry in his eyes. "It's recording," he'd said, testing the feed on his phone. "One at home, too." "We catch them, Fatima." She nodded, her throat tight. "Them" meant Carol, whose oversight felt personal. Margaret Ellis, the patron who questioned her English, or their neighbor Ellen Pritchard, whose fit-in complaints about their couscous dinners masked colder prejudice. The notes, the desk, Sammy's school taunts, they weren't random, Fatima knew, but proving it risked her job, their home on George Street, and their son Sammy, 12. The library was quieter now, the note's shadow lingering. Patrons came, but some, like Mrs. Lawson, avoided Fatima, asking Emily for help instead. At noon, Sammy arrived from school, helping with storytime prep. "Mom, Liam threw my book in gym," he said, stacking picture books. "Called me Zan kid again." Fatima's heart sank. Liam's taunts echoed the note's cruelty. "You're stronger than him, Sammy," she said, her voice firm, but her hand shook as she shelved a novel. Sammy's eyes dimmed, his soccer dreams tied to a school that stung him daily. That afternoon, Carol called Fatima to her office. "Your program schedule's off," she said, her tone sharp. "Patrons complained about cultural bias in your story time." Fatima's jaw tightened. She'd included one Arabic folktale approved by Carol. "I'll adjust it," she said, her voice calm, but her anger simmered. Carol's complaints were a trap. Carol's smile was cold. "Good. We need neutrality here." The word neutrality was a code, and Fatima knew it. Muslim, Moroccan, not Canadian enough. Last week, a patron had bypassed her, muttering foreigner, and Carol had said nothing. At home, Khalid shared his own fight. "A client dropped me," he said, his voice low. "Said my name sounds risky for their books." Fatima's chest ached. The pattern was clear: Carol, Margaret, Ellen, Liam at Sammy's school, a web to push them out. Sammy admitted Liam had tripped him, his desert rat slur hushed but cruel. "Coach didn't see," he said, his eyes down. Fatima hugged him, her voice fierce. "You belong, Sammy." Always. But the pebbles were piling. Khalid's clients, Sammy's school, the library, all battlegrounds. On October 13th, the camera caught something. Fatima, checking the feed during her break, saw footage from 2 a.m. A figure, Margaret, her retiree's posture clear, scrawling Haji on a library cart, glancing at Ellen's house, her porch light on. Fatima's pulse raced. She sent the clip to Khalid, texting, "It's Margaret. Ellen's in it." Khalid replied, "Don't confront yet. We need more." But Fatima's patience was fraying. She pictured Margaret's English jabs, Ellen's fit-in, Carol's oversight. They were a net tightening around her family. At the library, a patron, Mr. Chen, a Chinese-Canadian teacher, lingered after borrowing a book. "Fatima, I saw your desk," he said, his voice low. "My shop got tagged last year. Same vibe. Keep proof." Fatima nodded, gratitude mixing with dread. "Thanks, Mr. Chen." But patrons were wary, Carol's standards talk spreading. At school, Liam's taunts grew bolder, his shove leaving a bruise on Sammy's arm. Khalid's accounting firm faced a tax review, a client's complaint tied to Ellen's friend. A new note appeared in Fatima's bag, "Last chance." Her hand shook as she bagged it, Sammy's eyes wide. That evening, Fatima and Khalid sat in their kitchen, the footage and notes spread out. "It's not just Margaret," Khalid said, his voice low. "Ellen's covering, Carol's helping, we need to act." Fatima's eyes hardened. "We talked to Ellen first, she's the weak link." Khalid nodded, his resolve firm but fear lingering. Quietly, "We protect Sammy, the library." Fatima agreed, but dread crept in. Ellen's husband, George, was a retired city worker tied to Walsh. They were Moroccan Canadians, their roots deep, but Fredericton's thorns were sharp, and their fight was only heating up. On October 14, 2024, Fatima El Masri stood on the steps of her neighbor's house on George Street, Fredericton, New Brunswick, her heart racing as she clutched a printed still from the library's security camera. The image, captured at 2 a.m. 2 days prior, showed Margaret Ellis, a white retiree patron, scrawling Haji on a library cart, her glance toward Ellen Pritchard's lit porch a silent confession. At 40, Fatima, a Moroccan Canadian, was a bulwark against a tide of racism, notes demanding go back to Morocco and last chance, her desk defaced with Haji and her supervisor, Carol Bennett, undermining her with false errors. Fredericton's foggy chill hid a venom that threatened her library job, her family, and their place in the city of 60,000. Khalid, her husband, stood beside her, his accountant's eyes steady despite the strain. "We keep it calm," he said, his voice low. "Ellen talks, we get Margaret." Ellen, their white neighbor whose fit-in complaints about their couscous dinners veiled prejudice, was their target. Her porch light during the vandalism tied her to Margaret, and her husband George, a retired city worker, linked to Constable Brian Walsh, who dismissed earlier notes as pranks. Fatima nodded, her anger a quiet flame. The notes, the desk, Sammy's school taunts, they couldn't wait. They knocked, Ellen's face appearing, her smile faltering. "Fatima, Khalid, what's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Fatima held up the still. "This is Margaret, Ellen, vandalizing my library. Your light was on, you saw." Ellen's eyes darted to the image, her hands twisting her apron. "I didn't see anything," she stammered, but George emerged, his bulk looming. "You accusing us?" he growled. Khalid's voice was sharp. "We're asking, George. Margaret's marker, your porch, the notes. Stop it, or we take this further." George's face reddened, but Ellen's hand gripped his arm. "We don't want trouble," she whispered, her voice cracking. Fatima's gaze was unflinching. "Tell Margaret to back off, you know why." They left, George's glare a threat, but no note came that night, a fragile pause. At the library, Carol's scrutiny tightened. On October 15th, she called Fatima in, her tone icy. "Your storytime attendance is down," she said, ignoring the library's overall dip. "Patrons say it's too foreign. Adjust or we'll reassign you." Fatima's chest ached. Her Arabic folktale was 1 book in 10, approved by Carol. "I'll review it," she said, her voice steady, but her anger simmered. Carol's foreign was a trap. Emily, the new senior assistant, smirked nearby, her privilege unchallenged. A patron, a white man, bypassed Fatima, muttering, "Outsider," and Carol said nothing. Fatima's hands shook as she shelved books, her job a lifeline she couldn't lose. At home, Sammy's struggles grew. "Liam pushed me in the hall," he said, his voice low, showing a bruise, "called me terrorist." Fatima's heart broke. She saw the pattern: Carol, Margaret, Ellen, Liam at Sammy's school, a web to isolate them. "You're our star, Sammy," she said, hugging him, but her fear deepened. Khalid's accounting firm lost another client, citing trust issues with his foreign name. A new note appeared under their door. "You're done." Fatima's hands trembled as she bagged it, Sammy's eyes wide. Marla, braiding Kiana's hair, spoke softly. "We need cameras, Des. Like Aisha's library." Desmond agreed, but dread crept in. Cameras cost money, and the garage's profits were thin, stretched by rent, Kiana's school fees, Marla's salon supplies. On October 16th, the home camera caught gold. At 3 a.m., a figure, George, his retired worker's gate clear, spray-painted leave on their garage, a note left, "Final warning." Fatima's breath caught as she showed Khalid, Sammy asleep. "It's them," she whispered, her voice shaking. Khalid's eyes blazed. "We hit Margaret next, then Carol. No police, they'll bury it." Fatima hesitated, fear surging. Carol's authority, George's ties to Walsh, but Khalid's grip was fierce. "We're not running." "For Sammy." Fatima nodded, her resolve hardening. "Tomorrow, we end it." That day, Fatima arrived at the library to find her work cart toppled, books scattered, filth scrawled on a shelf. Sammy, helping with story time, gasped, tears falling. "Mom, it's too much." Fatima's heart shattered, but she checked the camera. 2 a.m., Margaret and a second figure, likely Ellen's friend. At school, Sammy's locker was defaced, sand rat in marker. Khalid's firm faced a compliance check, tied to Ellen's network. Aisha, the black librarian, texted, "They hit my office too, Fatima. Proof's your power." Fatima's folder, notes, footage, photos, grew, but using it meant risking everything. That evening, Fatima and Khalid marched to Margaret's house, a tidy bungalow on Regent Street. Margaret answered, her retiree's poise crumbling at the cart footage. "What's this?" she stammered. Fatima's voice was steel. "You, Margaret, trashing my library. George, too, painting our house. We have notes, footage, everything. Stop or we take it further." Khalid's phone showed the clip. Margaret's face frozen. "We know about Ellen, Carol, the taunts. It ends now." Margaret's eyes widened, but her voice was low. "You're making a mistake, Fatima." Fatima stood firm. "We're Canadians. This is our home. Try us." They left. Margaret's silence a crack, but Fatima's hands shook. The cost was crushing. On October 17th, the library was untouched. No notes, a fleeting calm. But Carol reassigned Fatima's story time to Emily, citing patron comfort. At school, Liam's taunts quieted, his dad absent. Sammy's teacher praised his math, a small shift. Khalid's firm gained a client. Aisha's words spreading. Fatima's heart lifted, but the library's hours were tight, their savings thin. She and Khalid sat late, the footage and notes between them. "We have enough," Fatima said, her voice steady. "If they push, we go to the police." Khalid took her hand, his eyes fierce. "We're El Masris. They don't win." Fatima's fear lingered, but her strength burned brighter. The library was theirs, and Fredericton would learn it, one quiet stand at a time. On October 18th, 2024, Fatima El Masri stood in the quiet stacks of the Fredericton Public Library, her hands steady as she shelved a book, her eyes flicking to the security camera's blinking light. The footage from 3 nights ago, George Pritchard, Ellen's retired city worker husband, spray painting "Leave" on their garage, leaving a note with final warning, was a sword in her pocket, shared only with her husband Khalid. At 40, Fatima, a Moroccan Canadian, was a fortress against relentless racism. Notes demanding, "Go back to Morocco," and "You're done," her desk scrawled with Haji, and her supervisor, Carol Bennett, sabotaging her with false errors and reassignments. Fredericton's foggy streets hid a venom threatening her library job, her family, and their son Sammy, 12. The confrontations with Ellen and Margaret Ellis had sparked a brittle calm. No new notes, no vandalism, but Fatima felt the town's undercurrent poised to strike. Khalid, his accounting shifts grueling, stood resolute. "We've got them," he'd said, clutching their evidence folder. Margaret's Haji vandalism, George's graffiti, photos of notes, audio of Carol's foreign jabs. Sammy's school taunts and Khalid's client losses mirrored their fight. Fatima's voice was steel. "We end this, Khalid, for Sammy." But Carol's authority, George's ties to Constable Brian Walsh, and Margaret's sway as a patron were a wall, risking their home on George Street, her job, their life. At the library, Carol's grip tightened. On October 19th, she cut Fatima's hours, citing budget constraints, though Emily's shifts grew. "Patrons prefer consistency," Carol said, her smile cold. Fatima's chest ached. Her Arabic folktale was long gone from story time, yet the foreign label stuck. "I'll manage," she said, her voice calm, but her anger burned. Carol's consistency was a trap. A patron, a white woman, bypassed her, muttering, "Not her," and Carol ignored it. Fatima's hands shook as she sorted returns, her job a lifeline she couldn't lose. At home, Sammy's pain grew. "Liam threw my soccer ball in the mud," he said, his voice low, showing a bruised wrist. "Called me jihadi." Fatima's heart shattered. The pattern was stark. Carol, Margaret, Ellen, Liam at Sammy's school, a web to crush them. "You're our champion, Sammy," she said, hugging him, but her fear deepened. Khalid's firm lost another client, citing reliability tied to his foreign name. A new note appeared under their door. "You're finished." Fatima's hands trembled as she bagged it, Sammy's eyes wide. On October 20th, the library camera caught a blow. At 1 a.m., 2 figures, Margaret and a second, likely Carol, trashed the children's section, scattering books, writing filth on a wall. A note was left: "Leave or burn." Fatima's breath caught as she showed Khalid Sammy asleep. "It's war," she whispered, her voice trembling. Khalid's eyes flared. "We hit Ellen again, then Carol. No police, they'll bury it." Fatima hesitated, fear surging, Carol's power, Walsh's bias, but Khalid's grip was fierce. "We're not running for Sammy." Fatima nodded, her resolve iron. "Tonight, we end it." That day, Fatima arrived to find her desk cleared, personal items misplaced, Carol's doing. Sammy, helping with story time, cried, "Mom, they hate us." Fatima's heart broke, but she checked the camera. Midnight, Carol's face clear. At school, Sammy's locker was emptied, terrorist in marker. Khalid's firm faced a fraud audit tied to Ellen's network. Aisha, the black librarian, texted, "They hit my desk too, Fatima. Proof's your strength." Fatima's folder, notes, footage, photos, was a weapon, but using it meant risking everything. That evening, Fatima and Khalid returned to Ellen's house, the library footage on Fatima's phone. Ellen answered, her face ashen, George behind. "What now?" she stammered. Fatima's voice was unyielding. "George painting our house. Margaret and Carol trashing my library. You knew, Ellen. Stop, or we take it further." Khalid's phone showed the clip, Carol's face frozen. "We have notes, audio, everything. Your silence ends." George's fists clenched, but Ellen's voice broke. "I'll stop them, George, Margaret, all of it. Please, no trouble." George growled, "You'll pay." But Ellen's sob held him back. They left, Ellen's plea a spark, but Fatima's hands shook. The cost was steep. On October 21st, the library stood untouched. No notes, a faint dawn. Carol restored Fatima's hours, her tone curt but shaken. "Oversight," she muttered, eyes down. A patron, Mr. Chen, lingered, tipping for her help. "You're a fighter, Fatima," he said. At school, Liam's taunts stopped, his dad absent. Sammy's teacher returned his project, graded fairly. Khalid's firm gained 2 clients, Aisha's word spreading. A note appeared in their mailbox. "Sorry." It was shaky, unsigned, maybe Ellen's, maybe Margaret's guilt. The library's shelves felt hers again, the evidence folder a silent shield. That night, Fatima stood in her kitchen, the tagine simmering, Khalid and Sammy beside her. Sammy's drawing, a family in a library, a star above, rested on the counter. The notes, the scrawls, the slurs, they'd scarred her, but so had Khalid's resolve, Sammy's courage, Aisha's texts, Chen's nod. They'd fought in the dark, no crowds, no noise, and claimed their place. Fatima touched the counter, its wood warm, and whispered, "This is our story, our light. Share it, carry it, let it burn through every shadow." She saw others, librarians, parents, kids like Sammy, holding their tale, passing it like a torch to light every page, a flame no hate could dim.